So the very common myth we used to hear, like most of the time, if you are pregnant, you need to eat for two.
Yeah, that's definitely a very, very common myth that you need to eat for two during pregnancy. And most of your friends will probably tell you that too, right? Oh, it's fine. You're eating for two. And it's easy to think that, right? Because you do have another human inside of you. I'll bet a very tiny, tiny human, right? And so, what I always say, instead of eating for two, I like to flip the script and say nourishment for two instead. Just putting the focus on nourishment, right? So, making sure that we are eating nutrient dense foods and paying attention to what we're eating,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't need to double the amount we're eating by any means. And I think there is some confusion too, because your nutrient needs are higher. So that's kind of another caveat where people think like, oh, my nutrient needs are so high, I just need to double everything. But in reality, your nutrient needs don't double. They increase, but not double by any means. There's one nutrient, iodine, where your needs increase by 50%. So that's like the highest nutrient that's going to increase pretty much. And for some nutrients like calcium, your needs don't even increase during pregnancy. So definitely don't need to eat for two. I just say you need to be more intentional about what you're eating, and just making sure you are focusing on getting as many nutrient dense foods in as you can.
Yeah, to adding to it, like since you mentioned we need to increase effort gradually, like based on the trimester. So, do you think we need to stay on a calorie deficit for the first, second, or we can eat like whenever we feel hungry? So, how do you see that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And of course, it's going to be individualized, right? So we are all so different and unique. So we're all going to have different calorie needs in
Mm-hmm.
and outside of pregnancy. But I think there is a very blanket recommendation floating around that, okay, during the first trimester, maybe you don't need to increase calories at all. Just kind of keep consistent with what you're doing. Or if you're going through nausea, just trying to get by, right? And then in the second trimester, you'll see ranges from like 300 to 400 extra calories, and then or maybe even 200 to 300, and in the third trimester you'll see recommendations for like 300 to 400 extra calories. So again, these are very blanket recommendations. Yes, some people
True.
might need that, right? That might be
Mm-hmm.
appropriate for some people, but not everyone, because we have to remember we're all starting out pregnancy so at such different places, and before pregnancy such different places. So for some women, you might not need to increase your calories at all. Maybe you
Mm-hmm.
just eat pretty similarly to how you were eating before pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if you were, kind of underweight before pregnancy, and your doctor really wants you to gain upwards of 30 to 40 pounds, then maybe you are someone who, even when the first trimester hits, you need to start eating more and then
Mm-hmm.
continue to eat more as you go on through your pregnancy. So it's definitely hard to just put a blanket recommendation out
Mm-hmm.
there that's like, okay, every pregnant woman needs to eat an extra 250 calories, then an extra 350 calories, because it just doesn't really make sense. And I like what you mentioned about kind of listening to your hunger and fullness, because I think that's huge. And honestly, that's how I kind of help my clients through it, is
Mm-hmm.
that more than anything, we want to focus on listening to our bodies and tuning
Mm-hmm.
in and realizing, right? Like, okay, I
Mm-hmm.
am super hungry today. Or maybe there's days when you aren't as hungry as you are other days, which is totally fine. And I think when we get into that calorie trap of like, oh, I need to hit a specific amount of calories, we kind of lose sight of what our
Mm-hmm.
body is actually telling us, and we get too fixated on the numbers. So it's like, listen to your body. It will tell you what you need, right? If you really listen in,
Mm-hmm.
and hear what it has to say. And I say this especially during pregnancy, because during pregnancy, you are going through a whole host of changes, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
things are happening so rapidly inside of you, and it's reflected usually in symptoms that happen and things like that. So the overall goal is just to really lean in, listen to your hunger and fullness. You aren't expected to eat the same amount of calories every day. So it's okay if some days you feel super hungry and then other days you're like not as hungry at all. That's normal. So if that's you, then know that that's definitely normal and you're probably doing okay.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. It's just a mindset when you're pregnant, you need to eat, you need to have a full stomach and all that. That absolutely
Right.
makes sense to listen to your body and do whatever it's needed for the body. Yeah.